Ladies and gentlemen, take a look, if you will, at superstar Billy Graham. From 1970 all the way to the late 80s, he wowed audiences in the professional wrestling world. His actual name was Eldridge Wayne Coleman. He was born back in 1943. In his prime, he stood 6 feet 4 inches and weighed 275 pounds. Graham had arm development that was never before seen in the wrestling world. And even compared to a bodybuilder, this man had a set of guns that were second to none. You may not think this most muscular is very impressive compared to a current IFBB professional, but trust me when I tell you, for the late 70s, this physique was top shelf. Graham began a bodybuilding career very young in life, capturing the West Coast Teenage Mr. America title in 1961. From there, I believe Superstar really had the bug and the itch to be a professional bodybuilder. So off he went to Santa Monica, where he trained with such superstars as Dave Draper, Franco Columbu, and none other than the Austrian Oak, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Of course, hanging out with the Austrian Oak all day long did not pay the bills. And it was then that superstar Billy Graham turned his sights towards professional wrestling. He had his formal training from wrestling legend Stu Hart. He of course ran the promotion Stampede Wrestling, which is actually way up here in Canada. It wasn't long after that Superstar was to join Dr. Jerry Graham and a tag team, and that's actually where he got his classic legendary name, Superstar Billy Graham. In 1972, Graham ended up in the AWA promotion, one of the top promotions of the time. It was then that he really developed his jive-talking ways and his loud persona. Then, right out of the blue in 1975, Superstar got that good old bodybuilding itch once again. He competed at that year's WBG Pro Mr. America contest. He didn't actually win the contest, which he did advertise in some professional wrestling circuits after this, but he did, however, capture the title of Best Arms. Not being a huge success in professional bodybuilding, I believe Superstar did some soul searching, and he realized that his calling was as a professional wrestler. And in 1977, he ended up in a title match with none other than Bruno Sammartino, who he actually dethroned. This was a huge deal. Bruno was champion for over 3 years. Can you imagine? Superstar Billy Graham ruled with an iron fist as champion. Superstar, of course, was known as a heel in wrestling lingo, which is a bad guy in a sense. But the audience was starting to cheer him. He was actually starting to turn into a face all on his own. Now, this was an even bigger deal. But Vince McMahon decided to go with the script, and as scheduled, he lost the title to a tall glass of milk, basically. This is Bob Backlund, a very, very boring wrestler, and I think a terrible choice. Personally, Superstar Billy Graham was devastated. Shortly after that, he left the WWF, joined the CWA, where he captured their title, and this was really an unknown version of Superstar Billy Graham to me. He lost that title to none other than Jerry Lawler, Jerry the King Lawler, which was a strange fact to me. It was an unknown, actually. By 1980, Graham had left professional wrestling altogether. He packed on 40 pounds. He was up to 300 plus pounds. And he decided to throw his hat in the name of World's Strongest Man competitors. He didn't do all that well, and to be honest with you, a lot of that weight was not muscle. I believe he probably would have did better back in his more leaner years. 2 years later, Superstar made his return to the WWF, and he lost so much muscle mass and weight that it was almost sad. He had this very strange karate gimmick or a martial arts gimmick, and to be honest with you, it was almost scary to see him in this state. I believe he was very dependent on prescription drugs at this time, but we're not going to get into too much of that right now. Shortly after, Superstar left the WWF and joined the NWA, along with Kevin Sullivan in the Army of Darkness. But you can see here that Superstar, I believe he started to get back on the juice. Perhaps he was eating healthier. He maybe even got off the prescription drugs. He just looked a whole lot healthier. He still had that karate gimmick, though, that martial arts gimmick. But eventually, he dropped that and got his tie-dye back, and he adopted his jive-talking ways again. Of course, Vince McMahon, watching from the WWF, he's seen dollar signs all over Superstar. So, of course, he signed him a contract and brought him on back. At no disrespect to Superstar, but at this time, he was big and all, but his physique, it was very poor, I believe, for professional wrestling standards, especially at the time. There was a lot of bodybuilders entering the ring. He had a couple of little segments where he did actually did a bodybuilding posing comparison with none other than Natural Butch Reed, which ended up in Natural Butch Reed snapping Superstar's leg and injuring him, which he actually was injured in real life. Billy Graham was set to wrestle in a tag team matchup at the 1987 Survivor Series. It was a big 10-man tag. But, of course, he was injured in that. But notice here how much larger Superstar's arms are than Hulk Hogan's. Or Hulk Hogan? Anyway, he's a cheap rendition of Superstar Billy Graham, if you ask me. But anyway, we're not going to get into that. Superstar was replaced by this man, Don Morocco. Look at that big beast. Funny thing is, shortly after this, Don Morocco had left the WWF, as well as Superstar Billy Graham. In 2002, Superstar underwent a liver transplant, where it actually saved his life. And at this time, he actually reconnected with Vince McMahon. So at this time, he was inducted in the 2004 WWE Hall of Fame. He eats T-bone steaks, he lifts barbell plates, he is sweeter than a German chocolate cake. He is the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour. He's the reflection of perfection, the number one selection, the ladies' pet, the men's regret, where what you see is what you get and what you don't see is better yet. He is Superstar Billy Graham, a professional wrestling legend.